Meet Addy, an American Girl by Connie Porter. Chapter 1. Whispers of Freedom. Addie Walker woke up late on a summer's night to hear her parents whispering. She thought no more of their quiet voices than of the soft chirping of the crickets in the woods just beyond the little cabin. Often she awoke to her parents whispering. Addie liked the sound. It made her feel safe, knowing her mother and father were close by. A small fire glowed in the hearth as the last coals burned down from the fire Mama had used to cook supper. Usually Addie liked the warm glow of the coals in the darkness. It was the only light in the windowless cabin. But tonight it just made her hotter. Sweat crawled down her small body like ants. The stiff, dry corn husks stuffing her palate poked through their thin covering, sticking her. Her older brother Sam lay on his own pallet near her feet. Addie could see his dark face in the firelight and hear his regular breathing. Her baby sister Esther lay next to her. Esther's steamy breath was blowing on Addie's face. Addie loved Esther, but it was too hot to be close to her tonight. Addie tried to wiggle away from the baby. When she turned from Esther, her parents stopped talking. "Hush, Ben," Mama said to Papa. "I think Addie woke up." Addie kept her eyes closed, but she could hear the rustle of corn husks when her father got up. His feet softly crossed the dirt floor. She opened her eyes just slightly as a shadow passed over her, covering her and Esther and Sam. Addie felt protected inside of it. She wanted to ask, "Papa, what you and Mama talking about?" But she kept her mouth shut. When her parents started talking again, she listened. "That child asleep, Ruth," Papa said to Mama, returning to their pallet. "She tired out." They had the children out in the fields half the day warming the tobacco plants. "Ben, listen to me," Mama said. Her voice was serious. "I don't think we should run now. The war is going to be over soon, and then we'll be free." "Ruth, I've done told you before, them Union soldiers ain't nowhere near our part of North Carolina. They all the way clear on the other side of the state," Addie's father replied. "Who knows when we going to be free?" "But Ben, we can't lose nothing by waiting. We all together here. That count for something," Mama argued. "Ruth, it should count, but you know it don't. With this war, time's hard. Money is real tight for the masters. A whole group of slaves was sold off the Gifford plantation because Master Gifford couldn't afford to feed and clothe them," Papa said. "That was Master Gifford. Master Stevens would never sell us. We work hard for him. We do everything he tell us. He need me to do sewing, and you do his carpenter work." Addie had never heard her mother speak so firmly. "What about Sam?" Papa went on. "I gotta drag him off his pallet when the morning work horn sound. He get up grumbling about not wanting to work for the master, and he take his grumbling out into the fields. He got a hot head and a hot mouth. Sam done run off once, and now he want to go fight in the war. All he talk about is going north to fight for freedom. If Sam don't watch it, he gonna be getting us all in trouble." Addie didn't like what she heard. She remembered when Sam had run off the year before, shortly before Esther was born. He was tracked down by Master Stevens's dogs and brought back. He was tied to a tree and beaten with a whip by Master Stevens. Addie screamed and cried, but her parents did not. They had blank, empty faces that made Addie angry. When the beating was over, Sam's back was covered with blood. Papa carried him back to the cabin, and Mama and Papa cleaned the blood from him. Finally, Addie yelled at her parents, "Y'all don't care about Sam at all! Y'all not even crying!" As soon as she said it, she felt bad. "Come here," her father had said softly. Addie went to him, ashamed to look at his dark, stubbly face. She held her face down, but her father lifted it and wiped away her tears. "Just because you don't see us crying and carrying on, don't mean we don't care. It don't mean we ain't crying either. Me and your mama crying on the inside. We ain't always free to show our feelings on the outside, but on the inside, we is free. There's always freedom inside your head, Addie." Freedom. That was what her parents were talking about tonight. But they were talking about a different kind of freedom. They were talking about the kind of freedom a slave had to run away to get. If Sam take off by himself a second time, we might never see him again, Mama said in a worried whisper. I want us all to be together. Papa didn't answer right away. Then he said, Uncle Solomon told me in the field today that there's a set of railroad tracks about 10 miles after the river near the Gifford place. We follow them north till they cross another set of tracks. Where they cross, there's a white house with red shutters. It's a safe house. An old white woman lived there, named Miss Caroline. She gonna help us. We only gotta get that far, Papa said. In the dark, Addy hugged Janie, the small rag doll Mama had made for her, the doll she slept with every night. Her parents' talk about running away scared her. She had never heard them talk about it before. Whenever Sam talked about escaping, they told him to hush up. If we get caught, Master Stephen's going to split us up for sure, Mama said, her voice shaky. I figure ain't nothing for sure, answered Papa, but we gotta take our chances while we got 'em. You can't go backing out on me now. I'm not backing out, Mama said. She sounded cross. I'm just scared. You want to go all the way to Philadelphia? I ain't ever been no farther than the Gifford plantation. What if we get lost from each other? We gonna go together, and we gonna stay together. God will watch over us. You gotta believe we gonna make it north. Papa sounded sure and strong. Addy knew he could protect them, no matter what. Let's just wait a little longer. When the war over, we all gonna be free. All of us right here, Mama said again. But Papa was firm. I hurt when I see Addy toting heavy water buckets to the fields, or when I see her working there, bent over like a little old woman. Sam already 15, but she a little girl, 9 years old, and smart as they come. She go out in the morning, her eyes all bright and shining with hope. By night she comes stumbling in here so tired, she can hardly eat. Esther's still a little baby, but Addy getting beat down every day. I can't stand back and watch it no more. We can't wait for our freedom. We gonna have to take it. Mama was quiet again. Addy wasn't thinking about the heat of the cabin, her prickly palate, or Esther's hot breath. She was waiting for her mother's answer. None came. She heard her father rise. He went to the hearth and covered the coals with ashes. When Addy heard him lie down, her eyes popped open. But now Addy could see nothing. There was no light in the cabin. In the thick darkness, Addy knew that she had heard a secret that she must keep to herself, no matter how hot it burned inside her. She could feel Esther's breath on her back. Turning to face her sister, she moved close and put her arms around her. The baby's breath did not feel too warm now. Addy was glad Esther was there on the pallet with her. As Addy fell asleep, the only voices she could hear in the night were those of the crickets in the woods. Chapter 2. Sold. Early the next morning, Addy was in the tractor field warming the plants. She and the other children moved from row to row, carefully pulling green, wiggling worms from the leaves. The worms were as fat as her fingers, but Addy tried not to think about them. Instead, she dreamed about the kind of freedom Mama and Papa had talked about the night before, the kind slaves ran away for. She saw herself learning to read and write. First, she'd write the names of everyone in her family. She saw herself wearing fancy dresses with lace, nothing like the rough cotton shift she always wore now. Papa would get paid for his work and buy so much food they would never be hungry. He would buy cloth for her fancy dresses, and Mama would make them for her. By 11 o'clock, the sun was high overhead, and Addy felt as if she'd worked all day. She had just finished warming her rows when it was time for her next chore, taking water to the field hands. The full bucket of water she carried almost pulled her arm from her shoulder. As Addy struggled with the bucket, sweat ran down her dark face and soaked the neck of her shift. But she liked this chore, because sometimes she had a chance to see Sam or Papa. On this day, she saw Sam. As usual, he had a riddle for her. "Riddle me this," said Sam. "What's smaller than a dog, but can put a bear on the run?" Addy thought hard as Sam took the dipper from the bucket and poured some water over his head. From a few rows away, the overseer snarled, "That water's for drinking, boy." Addy saw a scowl come over Sam's face. He mumbled, "Even a horse got to stop and cool off sometime." "I better get on," Addy said, worried that the overseer might come over to them. He carried a whip. "Naw," Sam said, his face softening. He was as tall as Papa, but he was skinny. When he smiled, Sam still looked like a little boy. "I ain't done drinking yet, and you ain't answered my riddle. What's smaller than a dog, but can put a bear on the run?" he repeated. He took a drink while Addy thought. She looked up to see where the overseer was. He had gone off in another direction. Addy crinkled up her eyebrows and said, "A skunk?" "You right. I don't know about you. You too smart for me, girl. Pretty soon you gonna be riddling me," Sam said. "Real soon," said Addy, smiling at her brother. Addy wanted to tell Sam what she had heard their parents talking about the night before, but the escape plan was so daring and dangerous, she could not share it with anyone, not even her brother. If her parents had wanted her and Sam to know, they would have told them. So Addy kept the secret inside and moved down the road to give the next field hand a drink. When the bucket was empty, she headed toward the kitchen to help Auntie Lula serve dinner to Master Stevens. The kitchen was a small brick building behind the big house. Addy hurried there, afraid she might be late. Auntie Lula was ready for Addy to work as soon as she stepped into the building. "Wash your hands good," she said, "and take that tray of food and water to the dining room." "Yes, ma'am," Addy answered. She liked Auntie Lula. She was an old woman, old enough to be Addy's grandmother. Her skin was light, and her hair, rusty red, was streaked with gray. She had a soft, open face, but sharp green eyes that could see right through you. Auntie Lula looked after Addy and her family. She gave them medicine when they were sick. One Christmas she made rock candy for Addy and Sam. The dinner Auntie Lula had cooked for Master Stephen smelled so good, Addy ached for a bite of it. All she had had for breakfast was cornmeal mush, and that was all she would have for dinner. Maybe Auntie Lula would hide away a few scraps for Addy to eat today. Addy washed and dried her hands, and then picked up the tray and hurried to the dining room. Master Stevens was sitting at the table with another white man, someone Addy had never seen before. She set the food on the table, and then poured water for both men. As they began to eat, she took her place standing quietly in the corner. "You got that little girl trained real good," the man said to Master Stevens. "She looks like a smart one." "I got them all trained real good," said Master Stevens. "That's why it's such a shame to let any of them go." Addy's stomach turned when she heard Master Stevens say those words. Let any of them go, she thought. What'd he mean, let go? "But I have 22 slaves to clothe and feed this winter," Master Stevens went on. "And you know how hard it is with the war. I need the money." Addy stared at the floor, but she was listening very closely. She let her face go blank and empty. "This boy you got for me," said the man. "How can I be sure he won't run on me, too? I know he's run before." "I taught him a lesson with the whip last time he ran off," Master Stevens answered. "And you'll have his father, too. His father can control him." They were talking about selling Sam and Papa. Addy just knew they were. Her father had been right. Master Stevens was going to split up their family. "Hey, girl, more water," the strange man said, turning to Addy. Addy hurried to pour her more water. "You sure you don't want to part with this one?" the man asked Master Stevens, patting Addy on the head. Addy's hand shook. She wanted to pull away from his touch, to scream, but the blank look was frozen on her face. She filled the man's glass and started to pour water for Master Stevens. "I'm not looking to sell her," Master Stevens replied, "but I know the price for good house servants is going up every day. Maybe when she's a little older, I'll let her go too. By then she might fetch a price as good as her brother. She's just too young now." Addy was listening so hard, she forgot to pay attention to her task and filled Master Stevens' glass too full. Water spilled on the table. "See, I told you this one's too young," Master Stevens said to the man. To Addy he said sharply, "Girl, go get a rag and clean up this mess." "Yes, sir," Addy said. She was glad to have a reason to run back to the kitchen. She burst through the door. Auntie Lula, she panted. That man fixing to take Sam and Papa with him. Master Stephen's going to sell them. Auntie Lula looked worried, but when she spoke, her voice was calm. If that be true, we don't have much time, Auntie Lula said. Listen to me good now. Take your bucket and run to the well. Fill the bucket and head right to the fields where your brother and father are at. But I already took water, Addy said. Hush up, child, Auntie Lula hissed. You a smart girl. Act like you think it's time for the afternoon water. Walk right out to Sam and your papa and tell them what you heard. If that man really coming for them, it's the one chance they got to run. I'll go back to the dining room. Now you get. Grabbing her bucket, Addy ran to the well. She ran as fast as she could, her bare feet kicking up little puffs of dust, her thick braids beating against her shoulders. Please don't let him take Sam and Papa. Please, God, she prayed silently as she ran. When Addy came to the well, she filled her bucket. She tried to run with it, but the water splashed crazily over the sides. With less than half of it left, she headed toward the fields, walking as fast as she could. Her throat was dry. Sam, Papa, where you at? She screamed inside. Outside, her eyes desperately searched the huge field. Addy was looking for Sam and Papa, and didn't see the overseer until he stepped right into her path. Hey, girl, he barked at her. What you think you doing? Addy was so startled, she dropped her bucket. I come to bring the afternoon water, she said. It ain't time for their afternoon water, you stupid girl. Get on out of here. I thought it was, Addy stammered. Don't give me back talk, the overseer snarled. Addy felt frantic, but she said nothing more. She picked up her bucket and ran back to the kitchen. When she got there, she saw her mother and baby Esther with Auntie Lula. Addy rushed to Mama and threw her arms around her. Mama, they selling Sam and Papa. I tried to warn them, Mama. I tried, she cried, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. I know you did, her mother said softly. Auntie Lula told me. Master Stevens and that man headed for the barn, Auntie Lula interrupted. Maybe they got Sam and your papa there. Addy's head jerked up. Maybe there was one last chance. Maybe she could still warn Sam and Papa. Addy raced out the door and headed for the barn. Addy, Mama called after her. Wait! But Addy did not stop. She was not thinking, not praying, just running, running, running. When she came to the field, she saw a wagon. Sam was in it, bound and gagged, shackled hand and foot. Master Stevens, the man from the dining room, and two other white men as big as Papa were standing next to the wagon. Sam, Addy cried out when she reached the wagon. Oh, please, Master Stevens, Addy begged. Don't let them take Sam. Get on out of here, Addy, Master Stevens ordered. He had a whip in his hand. Addy stopped where she was. Then she heard a deeper voice. Addy, go on now. It was her father's voice. But where was he? She looked down and then saw him lying on the ground, being chained by the overseer. Papa's face was covered with dirt, but it was calm. She ran to him, falling on the ground next to him. Oh, Papa, no, no! She threw her arms around him. He looked up at Addy. Everything's going to be all right, honey. You go on, he said. There were no tears on his face, but Addy knew he was crying inside. Get back, girl, Master Stevens barked. Addy heard his whip crack. She felt a lash on fire on her back, as if she had been burned, but still she held on to Papa. Master Stevens growled at her. I told you to get. Now get before I whip you again. He reached for Addy and yanked her away from Papa. Addy fell backward into her mother's arms. Mama held Addy close, both of them crying. This time, even Mama couldn't keep the pain hidden inside.